Okay, we are live on YouTube. Today is Thursday, February 13th. This is our weekly development meeting. This week meeting structure is going to be a little different, but I wanted to start off by thanking people who are working on contributed projects for Backdrop. This week we had 2 new stable releases out for the weight module in the taxonomy set lineage module. It also looks like there's a new Drush extension 1.3. So thanks, Jeff, for getting that out. And there's a note here that there's a command Drush watchdog show, which I think is new for that release. So that's it. I want to turn this over to Tim to help lead us through our initiative discussion.
Okay, so the plan here was to quick recap. Over the last couple of weeks, we've been doing a lot of goal setting and just sort of planning for the year. And we were, one of the issues that has come up is how to better set priorities and focus attention on important things. And a number of ideas have been thrown out there. One of them is the idea of sort of PMC endorsed initiatives with possible initiative leads. And we need to kind of flesh out what exactly, I mean, I don't feel like, I guess a consensus has been emerging that this initiative idea seems to be good. I would assume that for this to be official, the PMC might have to take some action, but I assume that what we're doing today is kind of fleshing out like a specific proposal that the PMC could then act on. Does that make sense? People can just nod their head. So we did, I was just looking in the forum, we do have under how to better set priorities for core development. In the forum, I sort of sketched out what some of what I was hearing about initiatives somewhere in that. So the goal here was to provide a more structure and incentives to work on issues that are determined to be important for the project. And the solution was PMC approved initiatives. And what might an initiative be? I'm just going to throw this out to get the discussion going. None of this has been decided yet. One or more people, an initiative could be one or more people collaborating on a specific issue or topic. Initiatives might be a single task. It might be a meta. It might be something facing a Backdrop core, or it might be a contrib issue like improving search and contrib or generating more contrib themes, reworking the color module, fixing the top 10 critical bugs. I think these are all at least potential initiatives, although we can talk about that today. Initiatives might have meetings on their own outside of the dev meeting or may not. I think initiatives should be expected to report back during, like dev meetings might be a chance for initiatives to report back on how they're doing. Every initiative, I think, needs at least a key organizer. It doesn't make any sense, in my view, for the PMC to set an initiative with nobody, if there's nobody willing to take some leadership or responsibility. And I think there's been some discussion about whether or not initiatives should be ongoing or have time limits. I think in my draft, I had proposed that they do have time limits, but I've heard Gregory suggest that maybe they don't. That initiatives are just ongoing. So I'd be curious to hear with that. So that's some of the ideas that I think have been thrown out there just to see the discussion, what other people think. Does most of that make sense, or what would you suggest?
Yeah, I think that initiatives are usually larger tasks. So their representation, I expect that their representation in GitHub would be a meta issue, just to break them down into smaller tasks. We discussed in Gitter the way that GitHub offers the option to pin certain issues, specific issues. So they're shown at the top of the list. And I think that it's a more realistic goal for us to set those 3 initiatives and then the communities of like groups around trying to finish those. What can happen if one falls through, or there's no activity, or it's being blocked to a point where no one is actually actively working on it? It could be replaced with another one. All that would have to be decided by the PMC. because most of these things would be so broad that they would basically steer the direction of the project as like the backdrop as a product. And I think that the PMC though should not be the sole decider or blindly be deciding. There should be input from the community. And I'm not sure what that means. Maybe it could be how many comments were in its meta or its issue. It could be traction that this issue gets because of certain events. For example, I'm thinking that the 777 end of life thing is time constrained. So maybe one initiative that is tied to that is more important than others, things like that. So, yeah.
So I want to continue the thinking of like, how is this different from advocates? Because I like our advocate system for being things that we give priority or at least call outs to during our weekly meetings. And I think it being larger is going to be pretty unquestionable, that it's not like a specific issue. It's a larger thing that has to be made up of a lot of different issues. I also think that it would probably, because we'd have an initiative lead, I think that would necessitate that there has to be more than one person that is on the team, if you will. So I think initiatives would almost always require a team to actually be committed to it rather than just one person. And other people can join in that team, you know, like, but I think that there would both need to be a team and that there would need to be some organizational method around those teams. Like we have these weekly calls that are the everything meeting. And I think that if you had an initiative that had a team, they would need to separately be meeting and coordinating on a regular basis. Probably also some kind of reporting that would need to happen, you know, like on a, maybe not a regular interval, but at least some kind of updates. Maybe the initiative lead would be on the weekly call to like shortly summarize how the overall initiative is going, you know, but not actually get into the nitty gritty detail of it every week.
Or it could be the same as we have with advocates, whereas if you can't make the meeting, you just update the summary, because I don't want to limit it to people who can attend meetings.
Yeah, I was about to say the same thing. Yeah.
In my view, initiatives don't have to replace the advocacy thing, because right now, I know, so the way Jen has presented this right now, anybody can nominate an advocate or can say that they're advocating for an issue. And apparently that sort of gets sent to the PMC, who can comment on that. But for the most part, I think it's been kind of up to an individual to say, hey, I want to work on X. And I think these things could work in tandem, because somebody could still want to advocate for an issue just because that's what scratches their itch. And whether or not the PMC agrees, we ought to give them that space. In my view, initiatives differ from advocacy in that the initiatives are definitely PMC approved. They're definitely a group. Whereas an individual could advocate on something themselves and just work it. But I don't know if we could. I think they could work in tandem, but I'm curious what others think.
Yeah, I think that advocated issues can potentially be subsets of the meta issues. So someone can individually grab one of the tasks specified in the meta, which is the initiative, or they can be individual, just random issues that are outside those decided initiatives, I would say. But it would be expected that, I'm not saying that it will happen, but if the community is focused on the initiatives, it might, the separate advocated issues might get less attention. Not necessarily, but it might get less attention, or priority, I should say. So I guess that people that are interested in the most important things and they have the capacity and the skills to do that, they would probably pick one of the initiatives instead of the advocated issues, and they would focus then their dev and code reviewing and testing efforts towards that. And maybe Jeff can elaborate on that what he thinks, because part of it was how we accommodate for developers as part of what we are deciding here.
Do people feel like we have a shared sense of what an initiative is already? Does that need to be discussed, or should we sort of move on to like how we're going to pick them and manage them?
I think that we should have a page in b.org that describes what an initiative is, the same way, and how it is, what the rules that govern how it's decided that something is an initiative, how it's communicated, how it's being represented in the issue queue, what it means if something is an initiative, things like that. And we don't have to just do it all now. It can be something that we iteratively work on.
What I'm envisioning right now is that after this meeting, somebody's going to have to draft up sort of a formal description of what we think we've all kind of agreed to today, and that would be something the PMC can look at. And I would assume others would have the opportunity to jump in and say, wait, no, that's not what I thought you were saying. But we won't get that done in this call, right? We're not going to have a formal definition, I think, at the end of this call yet.
It looks like the formal definition is going on in the agenda right now. To me,
Yeah.
I would copy and paste that into the PMC issue.
I have not been multitasking enough to keep up with that, but if everybody was
I've been trying to take notes.
sure. I just wasn't sure if it was going to be coherent enough to like be the definition.
Yeah.
So in my head, the things that Tim mentioned early this meeting, initiatives would be things like multilingual, like big, broad, and not really specific subjects, and then there would be sub tasks in them. How we prioritize those tasks within the meta issues, which are initiatives. There've been a few ideas, and one of them was to sort of like use the project boards in GitHub, and the other one was to have specific tags. And to that effect, I need to point out, I'm not sure if everyone is monitoring the Gitter channel. Doc Wilmot has posted a question but I think that you would like to bring to our attention is, yes, we've specified the initiatives, we specified the subtasks, but there would be other things like bugs which are important. We need to come up with a way that we prioritize those things as well. Like some way for people to get a notion of what is high priority at this point.
Sure. I would set that question aside because I think that there was a broader topic, which is how we prioritize things, right? And that initiatives may not cover everything, right? And but we can't, I don't know if we can solve all these problems at once. So my thought was we start with this initiatives discussion, and that might partially solve like the individual prioritizing bugs, but to the extent it isn't, we keep this discussion going and we can talk about that next week. I hope that initiatives at least partially solves that problem. That's my thought.
Yeah, so Dr. Wilmot expressed the opinion that it might not. There would still be a problem for him, and I see what he means. When important things slip through because they're not part of the initiative, important bugs.
Isn't that what advocates can do? Like if you think a bug's important, then advocate for it.
Yeah, and make sure that it's on the agenda. Yeah.
Right. If it has an advocate, it should be on the agenda and updated weekly.
Well, the other thing is, in my view, there could be an initiative. I'm not saying there will be, but one possible initiative is identify the most top priority 10 bugs and work on them. You know, that's like a possible thing. So if that happened, that would address Doc Wilmart's concern, but we're not sure yet because we haven't decided what the initiatives are. So.
How in reality, like if we get to see the practical things aspect of things, how do we we seem to sort of like have an idea how we signify initiatives, and we can publicize them in b.org to make it more official. How do we signify important prioritized issues in the issue queue? So some people express the opinion to add a an additional label, same as we have the good first issue, to have a
Right.
high priority.
Gregory, I think that's a different topic, and I think we're talking about initiatives right now.
Okay.
I'm not disputing that that isn't something that needs to be talked about, but I think it's sidetracking.
Defer it, do it next week, for example.
Right, but I've also suggested it could be that we create an initiative to solve that. So let's just deal with the initiatives and then see
Okay.
where that comes from. So,
Okay, what's
Okay.
next to be decided on initiatives?
well, I think the next thing is how do initiatives get decided?
Okay,
How are we picking them? And I don't know if it would be worth like someone else. Well, I've thrown out some examples already. There's assumption that the PMC has to be, I mean, our definition of this is that initiatives have to be PMC approved. But I guess the question is, how do they do that? Are they doing that based on survey results, which has also been suggested? Or, you know, would there be just like a week where we all dump our ideas for initiatives into a forum topic, and then the PMCs has the job of sorting through that result and picking? I do think that like we should exercise some discretion on how many initiatives there are. If we get too many, that will, I think, has the potential to kill them. So, but I think that has to be kind of left up to the PMC, I guess. What do others think about that?
Well, the items that we've got in the agenda include some kind of voting process, community vote, plus PMC approval, straight up PMC assignment, you know, where PMC could just evaluate what's happening in the community and then decide that there should be an initiative or somehow assign it to people or recruit people. And one for like a proposal. And actually this last one, volunteer led plus team established, volunteer lead maybe, plus PMC approval. Yeah, that's kind of, I'm not sure how that differs from proposal, where there would be a community.
Doesn't have to have anyone working on it.
Oh, okay. Well, I was thinking a proposal would have to include the lead and the team in the proposal.
Yeah, I would certainly say that a proposal with that is much stronger than a proposal without that. I mean, that's going to go a long way for, I think, for getting your initiative accepted.
Yeah, I think that voting might not work because there's a lot of things that people are very excited about that they think should exist, but we don't actually have the capability to do them because we don't necessarily have a team. And so,
yeah, another problem possible with voting is it could go against what's the decided direction of the project by the PMC.
That might be a good indicator that the direction of the project isn't what the community wants. But I agree that voting probably isn't the best way to go for this.
Yeah, we get, I guess we shouldn't stifle opinions, but at the end of the day, at some point, a measure has to be taken to say, yes, these opinions are in line with and we should do it. Or these are too far-fetched or not the right time, something of that nature.
So I have two thoughts on that. A, it seems that this makes the telemetry thing very important as an issue. So we need to, it will help us to grab some metrics, some actual numbers that we can, that can help us decide. And the other thing is that the way that I could imagine this working is that the PMC takes into account the community, the feel of the community and what they would like to prioritize. But what we should do is we should come up with a pool of meta issues, which are initiative candidates, present this pool of issues to the PMC, and then the PMC decides. I just said 3 before. I'm not sure if we set on that number a certain amount of initiatives that we can work on, which has to be realistic given the amount of people working in the community. So my fear is that if we pick more than 3, there's not enough hands on deck to sort of like see them through in a relatively short amount of time. So maybe we should decide if everyone agrees with that amount of issues, and then we get 10 or 12, present them to the PMC, and the PMC decides which ones are more important based on certain things. and then we communicate that via a blog post, and we give people the opportunity to sort of like object and like present arguments as to why some initiatives are more important than others. I'm sure there's going to be some. Yeah.
I have thoughts on that too. The last time we talked about initiatives, I don't remember if it was in a weekly meeting or before or after or whatever. I think I might have mentioned this too, that for me, an initiative is something that's bigger than a single release. Like something like usability isn't something that's going to get fixed in a single issue. It's not going to get resolved in an issue, something like translation. And it could be that during a given release, we don't have any work happening on that particular initiative, but that doesn't mean that that's not a priority for Backdrop. And so I wouldn't want to limit the number of official initiatives to the number of active official initiatives, if that makes any sense. Like it would be really clear, I think, for people to come to like the roadmap page and say, these are our initiatives, and you can see, I don't know, 5, 6, 10, however many. These are the things Backdrop really wants to improve going forward. And in any given release, there may only be 3 that are active, and I think that's totally fine. There may only be 3 teams and 3 people moving stuff forward. But if you have these initiatives that span more than a given release, it'll set like a longer term direction of the project, which I think is also important. So I don't know if that, maybe we're talking about 2 things. Like maybe an initiative is only something we have 3 of, and these are like goals. But I would like to see some parallel between that. So for any given release, we can look at a goal and say, hey, what are the initiatives we're going to do this cycle relating to improving translation or whatever the initiative is, and see if we can, it'll give sort of guide rails to figure out what's the most important thing to work on for the next release.
Yeah, so I wouldn't want to sort of like limit extensively or specifically an initiative and bind it to a specific release. It can be a goal, but because the initiatives are broader, like it takes usually, think of the multilingual initiative, since we have Olaf in the group as well. It's such a big aspect that will not be solved in 1 release or 2. But still, if we decide that it is a priority, it should be a priority, and subtasks should be worked on towards that goal. I know that there's going to be tough decisions made. That's one thing that the PMC will take on. Like out of the 12 or whatever number of initiatives, we have to carefully pick the 3 ones. And I'm sure that some people in the community may choose to not work on those. Like it's not, we don't want it to be limited. Like we don't want to say to the community, we're working on that and nothing else. So yeah, there's so long as we have an understanding, it doesn't have to be a what you call it, a mandated or dictated course.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I think so too. I'm going to just say, in response to Jen, I think I liked your designation better. Is that about goals and initiatives? To me, the idea of an inactive initiative kind of defeats the purpose a little bit. It's like sort of the purpose of creating initiatives is to say, here are the things.
No initia on an inactive initiative. Yeah.
So, but I do think having bigger goals that might not be active right at the moment, but that also gives a framework for the initiatives. Initiatives should be addressing goals, right?
So thinking about inactive initiatives, that it's almost inevitable that there'll be enthusiasm at some point that will wane, you know? And I think creating an initiative, once we figure out what that process looks like, I think that can be pretty clear. But then like decommissioning initiatives, I think is going to come into question pretty quickly, you know?
Yeah.
That I kind of think maybe we should put like a term limit or something on them, like an annual, like this is an initiative for the next year or until renewed, you know, so just state up front that there's like an end to the initiative. And that also kind of drives a little bit of, what's the right word? Like it motivates people, deadlines drive completion, you know? So I think that would help a little bit from that aspect too.
Instead of having a physical, like a deadline being an actual release, I think that maybe that if we notice that an initiative has had no activity, it can at any time with the decision of the PMC be replaced by another one. So we decide on 3, and if there's no movement, we're going to say sort of like the community did not sort of like gather around this issue, didn't get enough traction, so it seems that there's more focus on that. So
Yeah, what worries me is that anything that requires an active decision, both might not be done and could be taken like as the PMC saying that we don't think this thing is important.
okay,
And I think if we had it be upfront saying that all initiatives last 1 year from the time that they start until they get renewed, makes it so that they would passively expire if they weren't active, and avoid that problem of us needing to and we'll still probably need to evaluate them at the year mark and say, hey, do you want to continue this initiative? Because I think there's potential for it going wrong too if we just like take it off the website after 1 year because it's like, oh, it wasn't renewed, and they're like, well, I was never asked, So there'll still be effort either way, I guess.
Yeah.
Could we have a section of past initiatives that has maybe a summary that like, this is a past initiative because we consider it complete. This is a past initiative because we lost bandwidth. If you have bandwidth to reopen the, little summaries of the past ones. So they're not like.
I think that past initiatives should only be the ones that we sort of like sorted, like should solve through to the end. The ones that we postpone should not be passed because it implies that we're never going to look at them again.
They're just inactive initiatives.
Inactive, yes, or they get in the pool for consideration for next year.
Yeah,
I could see some things like internationalization or translation coming in for a year and then like fading out and then coming back in later.
Right.
Yeah, getting much better, and then now it's no longer the thing that needs the most attention.
I think that Jeff's point was just that we have a list of what we've worked on and why, either that it's still active or if not, why, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't, go ahead.
I would also like to see, like, if we come up with a set of 10 initiatives, only 3 of which are active, I would like to see all 10 of those documented somewhere as, like, we can call them goals or future initiatives or whatever you want to call them. But it would be great to have that entire pool where it's like, these are the 3 we're working on right now. These are all the other things we care about. And to have a summary on each of those that'll be like, why it's not being worked on right now. Like, we have 3 current initiatives and we'll work on this later. We don't have a team lead, or we ran into a blocker on X issue or whatever. It would also be really useful if people come in and like, oh, I really care about that thing. I want to work on it. Why isn't it active? And I also think the number 3 can grow if we start getting more people working on stuff too. So I think 3 is a good number right now to start. But like, if 2 releases from now, we have a bunch of people who want to work on something that's not an initiative, and our 3 initiatives that are already working are going really well, I want to make sure that we have that open.
Yeah. So the way that initiatives work in that aspect on Did.org is that there's a landing page that lists all of them with a summary, and each one links individually to their own page. What we can do with each individual page is we can have updates. So we can have like a field that has a date and a short summary. Update, this ticket was sorted. So I think I posted links. If you look at maybe I can share my screen. So the way that initiatives work in D.org is that they have a bullet point list, and the ones that are done are crossed out with a done and maybe a link to the change record or the issue that was solved. So people don't have to go to the long discussions that may be happening in the issue queue. They can just go there and see the summary and see what's next.
I think a pretty big issue that we haven't talked about yet today is what authority do initiatives have. Because one of the potential benefits of initiatives is if we had a UX initiative, is that they could make, we have this separate issue that came up during our outreach or our planning, which was how do we make decisions when issues get stuck? And I guess what I'm getting at is, will initiatives help us solve that? Will we be able to give a UX initiative the ability to make, to have a UX lead that can make decisions on unstuck issues? How do people feel about that?
I think yes, the initiative lead has to have some amount of power, and if it comes into a dispute within the issue, then it maybe can be raised to the PMC, but otherwise the initiative lead should feel empowered to break log jams and move things forward.
I mean, they can't commit code necessarily. Maybe they can, but if they can't, it isn't like they're making an irrevocable decision, but they're just sort of unjamming it until it gets to, there's still core committer review, right? So.
Yeah, speaking of that power or authority, just an idea to put out there, like maybe initiative should have an assigned core committer. Like right now there's 3 of us, and if one of us shows particular interest in a particular area, volunteer to actually be active in guiding those issues that are in that initiative specifically. So that's another potential way of like guiding authority into actually like preventing just the endless bike sheds where it's like, all of the decisions were fine. It's just nobody committed it, which happens. That might help. And that's just an idea.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm trying to share my screen. Can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Yeah, so this is what is in the landing page that I was referring to about the strategic initiatives, which are announced by Dries at its DrupalCon. So there's a list of the initiatives, and it has a planning, a status, just a general one. And then each one of them has its own page, with sort of like a blurb, and what are we working on? And some of them are like that, plans, but some of them are crossed out saying, yeah, this is done or not. So I think this would be useful. Like this is, I find this like, and we like there's links to the roadmap, the tickets, so people can get involved. So I think that it should work the same way for us. I think that this is working. And I agree that there should be a designated, at least one designated person that is a tech lead, shall I say, and a core committer. And then one person from the community, doesn't have to be PMC or anything, that's sort of like the lead or the tiebreaker or the person that communicates any updates with the dev meetings, either directly by joining or by updates. I think it makes sense.
I don't object to the idea of like having a core committer for each initiative, except that I'm not sure if we're prepared for that, right? We have limited, can we handle that? If we can, great. And it might be something that drives, maybe initiatives help or provide a reason to add core committers. I don't know.
Yeah, well, we want to add more core committers anyway. That's a separate thing. But another new idea is that we could also have provisional committers for a particular initiative. So it's like if it's related to this thing, then there'd have to be some discretion involved on the part of the committer, the provisional one, to say I'm only going to work inside my space. But if we're trusting anyone to commit to the code base, we're already trusting them in extraordinary amounts. So letting them have that discretion, I don't think would be a problem.
I agree.
I feel like we've got kind of an outline. I'm sure there's going to be details that have to be negotiated and talked about in the future. But the next step really seems to be getting some initiative ideas out there and deciding on them, right? And we talked a little bit about that already. But we have to, I think we should leave the meeting today with a firm idea of what's next. And I could envision, here's just something I can envision, which is a 1 or 2 week period where people are sort of proposing initiatives. And then at the end of that, it's up to the PMC to kind of, and during that time, we could also continue to iron out the details. Like we could have a formal draft proposal on how they're working, and people could still provide some feedback and input on that. And then at the end of that 1 or 2 week period, it's up to the PMC to both approve the process and make some decisions on which ones we're supporting. Does that make sense? My specific proposal doesn't involve any kind of voting yet, and I'm okay with that, but just wanted to clarify that. Like voting from the community, that's what I meant.
Yeah, so voting from the community and telemetry should be maybe initiatives that are prioritized because we need it for the initiatives. So, and one thing that we need to establish is that we've talked about it quite a few times, is that we should have regular meetings, not as regular as the weekly meetings, but maybe bi-weekly, like fortnightly meetings with the PMC. Maybe something that we should establish, like a 15 minutes or 30 minutes discussion to go through the queue.
Issue in the PNC queue about that.
Yes, I know. Yes.
Here's a PMC issue to discuss PMC issues.
Regularly.
Regularly.
Yes, regularly. As in set a date and a time, the way that we do for these meetings here.
So regarding process, Tim, sorry, I just want to jump in there. That it seems from what we're talking about that the proposal approach seems to be kind of the direction that we're heading.
One thing I would like to caution with this proposal approach is that if you have to have a team lead and a team ready to go before you make the proposal, then we're only going to get 3 proposals, and that's not enough to set our goals. It's enough to set the active initiatives, but it's not enough to set the pool of inactive initiatives. So I think maybe we should have like some kind of wording in the application or document, that's the template or whatever it is, that would say like, if you want this to be an active initiative, please also provide whatever. But if it's just a suggestion for something that should be important to Backdrop, I don't think we should eliminate it because it doesn't have that stuff.
Yeah. Oh, what about for the person that's submitting the proposal? Maybe it's not necessarily like an email to the PMC or something like that, but instead it's like a blog post where it's like a call to action saying, I would like this to be a proposal. Here's why. I'm looking for volunteers.
Or we could have a topic specifically for initiatives.
Oh, on backdropcms.org?
On the forum.
Oh, on the forum.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that a lot more because that makes it so that it's like a community-driven place where it's clearly not official if it's just a forum thread.
So I think it's okay that if you don't have a lead or a team to submit a proposal, but it is required before it's approved. And I think there's a place for the PMC to say, okay, we've got this proposal. We think it looks really good. There isn't a lead right now, but before, we have to identify one before we approve it.
Well, it doesn't have to not be a goal. It just has to not be
Right.
active. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And we can sort of like call to action, like, okay, this has been proposed. We are considering it, but in order to approve it, we need you to sort of like, we have 2 or 4 weeks time to just gather a team of people around it.
That's great.
Yeah, I like that forum idea quite a lot because that's exactly what it could be used for. That it's like, I have this idea, solicit volunteers in the thread. And
so should we have a forum topic or a forum section, and each proposal's its own topic?
Yes.
Okay.
Section and
A section. Okay.
And should we work on preparing some sort of similar sections on the website, the way that Drupal has them, like an initiative landing page? Sure. And yes, yeah, so like a content type of named initiative. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
My view on that is that we absolutely want that, but could be a month from now.
Yeah.
We can start the process without that, right? That's all I'm saying. But yes,
so long it's on the roadmap. Yeah. On our radar, rather.
So I'm going to a spoiler for those who haven't heard. Greg or Jeff and I, at least, have been started talking about the telemetry, right? So I think we would probably propose that as an initiative, but it also occurs to me that even if it is an initiative, that doesn't mean that Jeff and I aren't going to work on it. So I think we would propose that as an initiative, and it could very well be that the PMC decides, yeah, this is really important, but it's not necessary. We think it's going to get worked on anyways. That's one way of thinking about it. I don't know.
I'm very passionate about it. I started topicsindie.org.
Right. I think the point I'm trying to make is that just because something doesn't, that we could submit something like, hey, I don't know what I'm trying to say. I guess I'm just trying to say it does. Just because we're excited and we want to work on it doesn't mean that the decision about it becoming an initiative is whether or not it happens, right? So
Yeah,
like I can still advocate for it even if it doesn't become an initiative.
right. Yeah, but I think if it were an initiative, it
Yes.
lends additional authority to it and
Exactly.
prioritization to it from the general community. And if we can publicize it better, if we have a section on the website, I think there's benefits to it being an initiative.
Absolutely.
And if there's things that are going to happen anyway, totally make them an initiative,
Yes.
like that is exactly what we should be doing. That makes it so those things are getting the visibility and authority they need to progress.
Yeah, and telemetry fits in that thing because things around dropping PHP support or old browser support, we need solid data in order to make these decisions. And these are already things that are happening in other communities like WordPress. It's sort of like a blocker for other directional sort of like decisions for the project. If we drop PHP version 5, for example, there's one less test running in the CI, which is a bit longer than the 7. There's other aspects of it. I can't remember now where, like we had a tag, I can't remember what the tag is, like it needs metrics or something like that. So we might have already some tickets in the queue that are tagged with it. So yeah.
Okay, well, I think we have kind of decided, we have at least a rough idea of what we think initiatives are and a proposal for moving forward. So is there anything else that urgently has to be decided about initiatives today? Or should we save a few minutes to see if anybody has anything else?
I want to bring up one thing that Doc Wilmot mentioned in the chat, and that's that setting up initiatives is going to help us determine, like on a sort of a future goal, what's important to backdrop, but it's not going to help us look at the current issue queue and say, is this bug a priority or not? If it's not in an initiative, it might get missed entirely.
Yes.
And so he also recommended that maybe we have somebody whose designated job it is to like review the issues and be like, oh, this one actually is important. Let's not let it slip through the cracks. Or maybe that could be something that's like given to a PMC member or has some kind of its own flag or something that's like some way that we can help with the issues we currently have that aren't part of initiatives.
We touched upon that.
Isn't that what an advocate is?
So we don't currently have advocates for bug fixes. We only have them for features.
Yeah, but somebody can advocate for it if they think it's important. Advocate for it.
Yeah, you can advocate for bugs.
I think you can. I'm sort of on the fence about whether or not we need something in addition to address Doc Wilmot's. I think my recommendation would be that we come back to that issue in a week or so and specifically look at that is a separate issue and whether or not initiatives are going to help us solve it or not, and if not, what else we can do.
Okay.
And like I say, it could actually be an initiative. There could be a bug fix initiative, and their job is to identify the most important bugs and keep them on our radars.
Sounds great.
Yes.
Okay.
So it seems we have already decided about 2 things.
Well, we'll see. Okay. So I'm going to suggest that we're done with the initiative discussion for today. And we've sort of tabled the bug fix issue that Dr. Wilmot is raising. Can be discussed through the initiatives, or we can have a separate discussion about that in an upcoming meeting. I don't think we can solve it today. Is there anything else we need to talk about? We have that issue we were talking about before the meeting, Jen and Gregory. I don't know if we want to save that till after the meeting or if we should start that at the end here. I think there would be some.
I don't mind either way. I just need to catch up with that specific issue in the queue, like the comments.
Sure.
I do want to do a brief project update since we haven't had one in a couple of weeks now.
Sure. Why don't you do that?
Great. So just a quick summary of issues that are in the 1.16 branch. That's the next version that comes out May 15th, 2020. There's a couple of issues that have been seeing some activity that are exciting. One of them is last week or over a week ago, we merged in issue 74 which is Entity Cache in Core, which I'm very excited about. We had that RTBC in the 115 release cycle, but we didn't want to merge it right before a minor release. So as promised, we merged that in. Big thanks to Joseph for putting that together, taking the lead on it, and seeing it through. That's very exciting. Also new, this past week, issue 2805, allow config overrides, was something that had also been worked on several months ago. HerbDuel came back in and added tests to the work in progress pull request that make it so that we can do config overrides in settings.php. So that's very exciting. It's been marked RTBC. We'll need to get another set of eyes on that, and then potentially we could see that in 116 as well.
The cool thing about it is that we can do config overrides in any setting.
Yeah.
Not just specific. Yeah.
Right. So right now there's settings that are for certain things like secret credentials and things like that. But for config that is public and stored in config files, this will allow you to hard code it or make the values dynamic or environment specific, all of those things. So it's very cool. And lastly, an issue that we just want to draw attention to is one that we alluded to a couple of minutes ago, which is 1475. Better workflow states. Doc Beaumont has been working on that. It's currently blocked. He's requested additional feedback. And I think that a couple of people in this meeting have said, we're going to go give some feedback.
Talk about it after the meeting's over.
So that's it for the 116 milestone update. I don't have anything to add in the 115 milestone update, which is great news. We have merged, I think like, I don't know, half a dozen or a dozen small bug fixes, but none of which have been substantial. And so 115.0 has been rolling on now for almost a month without really any need to make a bug fix release with any immediacy. So I think also related to 115 being rolled out, HerbDuel updated the Pantheon upstream. Is that right, Jen?
Sorry. Yeah, I think it was HerbDuel. I don't remember. Somebody updated for us.
So we normally have this 2-week grace period before we update all of our upstreams for the next minor version. At this point, if we haven't updated any upstreams, like go ahead and do it, because there's no immediate need for 115.1 that is seen. Okay, that's it for the product update.
Okay. This issue that we want to talk about, I'm torn if we should just keep recording. Nobody has to keep watching, or if we should do it after. Any thoughts?
We can record it.
I mean, I think there's some value in recording this because it's a popular issue. So should we go ahead? And, okay. So I'm going to take a stab at describing this issue I don't have it open in front of me right now. It's the workflow states one. And it has to do with basically right now that a node is either published or not published. And I think that the ultimate goal was to add some more flexibility there. Part of my understanding is the goal was at least behind the scenes to make that more flexible so that there could be other states and that that also could take advantage of. What I think my sense is what's happened is we started thinking about a UI for that, and I'm getting a sense that there's slightly different visions about what a simple UI to actually make use of that feature in core would be. So I'm going to use Jen, you, and myself as examples. I sort of took the approach of what's sort of the minimal UI, the minimal amount of functionality that would be useful to me with that state, which was just the ability to like have an unpublished draft ahead of a published draft. So we have a published node, we revise it, but we don't publish that revision. So that's in advance. And I have been sort of describing what I thought a good UI would be for that minimal use case. What I'm hearing from you is something a little bit different, and you can tell me if I'm wrong. What I'm hearing from you is that you're looking at kind of a workflow, what's the workbench type workflow, and describing a UI that would be a little bit more advanced there, where you might actually have an actively published version, and then you might have another version that's being drafted and waiting for approval from another user. And that's, I mean, to me, that's just a different use case. It's a little bit more complex use case. And like
Wait,
one of the things, go ahead.
what's the difference between, so yours was that there's no published draft and mine is that there's an old published draft?
Yours is that there, in my scenario, there's never an active version that isn't published, or the most recent, right? It's either the most recent or it's published. And I think you
Wait,
have
what do you-
proposed.
What do you mean by active? Sorry, I'm just trying to make sure we're using the same words.
Well, that's part of, I think, the dilemma we're having is, to me, it doesn't make sense that there's anything other than, like, to me, you've got a published, if there's 6 versions of a node, right? Any one of them could be visible on the site. I've called that published, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
to me, the active version is the most recently edited,
Oh,
that's, right? And whether that's published or not, it's the most recently edited. It, by definition, is active.
huh.
And you've described that differently.
Yeah, no, for me, active. So for me, the node is either published or not. And no individual revision can be published or not. It's just the node. Like either the node is
It's a
published
semantic.
on the site or it's not. And any individual revision is either active or it's not. Active being the one that you can see on the site or not. So if you have an unpublished node, if you look at it, something is active because you're reading the page, but it's not published. The node itself is not visible to public. It's only visible to whoever's reading it. So active for me has nothing to do with time. It has to do with what is currently viewed. So I think that's probably one communication issue we were having. And we can use a different word. I'm here to active. And then, so my use case would be like, you have an unpublished draft, but maybe, or you have an unpublished node, but maybe it has like 8 drafts. Like it went through a bunch of revisions and none of them are ever active because the node, or none of them ever published because the node is never published. But one of them is going to be active at any time. And it could be that like the first one was vetoed and then the second one's active. And then a third one was drafted, but then it got thrown out. So then the second one remains active. And then fourth one was created later. Like, I don't know, there, whatever it is, but the whole node itself has never been published. So I think that the confusion to me is like whether, I know in the database it's called status in both the node table and the node revision table. In my mind, the question is like, is that the same thing when on a node or on a node revision? Like, do we call it published in both places? Or can you have an unpublished node with a published revision? Like, does that make sense?
So to me, published is being governed by the permission that says people can view published content. So it's published to me translates to something that can be viewed usually by the site visitors, not people that are necessarily logged in. This is the default out of the box. You can, of course, assign the permission for anonymous users to view unpublished content, which I don't think everyone does, but it's a possibility. So published is governed by that permission. Then you could have a revision that is the active one, as in if anyone tries to access this node that they have permission to access it, they will see that version. And then you can have revisions before that and after that.
Yeah.
The previous revisions are there for backup reasons to revert to, and the forward ones are there for work that is being potentially done.
Yeah.
So the actions of making a revision, either past or forward, active, and the action of publishing the node are different. So publishing publishes whichever revision is active.
Okay.
Okay.
Let me ask,
So can we use a different word than active? Because I think that a bunch of people are also going to get tripped up on the same thing Tim is, that like, I don't care about the one that people are seeing because I'm not working on it. The active one, the one that's getting acted on, is not visible. Like, what if we just called it like visible or something?
sure. I think one of our issues is semantic, and that's it. But let me ask a different question that is more functional, that I think is going to help us settle this.
Okay.
Because the current version Doc Wilmot has, the other dispute we've been having is, okay, there are 6 versions of the site, right? 1 through 6. And if somebody wants to edit version 4, what does that mean, right? And originally, and I have been looking at it, how Django handles this, which I thought was simple and easy to understand. In Django, in an earlier version of the PR, anytime you edited a revision, it became a new revision. You can't like change the 4th revision, because that doesn't make semantic sense, right? The whole that is like locked in time. Once you've saved revision number 4, it is number 4, and anything that any changes you make to any revision become a new revision. The current version of the PR doesn't do that. The current version of the PR actually lets you go back and change history. You can change version 4, and it doesn't become a new. And does that make sense? Is my question.
Yeah, so I think the issue here is like what the node form does versus what the edit revision form does. Because on the node form, if you're on a revision, there's a checkbox that's like make a new revision or not. And if you're editing a revision, if you have that checkbox and you don't check it, you should be editing history. You should not be editing the present. Now, if we were to remove that part of the interface so that when you were editing something, it always was something new. And like there's, I think, an admin setting that's like always create a new revision. Like in that case, I think that workflow makes sense where you're always creating a new one. But because we already have this feature that I think trips me up, and maybe will trip other people up too, where you can choose not to, you can choose to edit history. We need to make sure that functionality is possible. And I don't know whether it should do that by default, but if it, whatever we do by default, we need to make it clear to the user that that's what's happening. So if from the revision page, you want to edit an old one, you don't act. So the use case that I'm have encountered most commonly with this is that you have a new version of the article that is under review and it's not ready to go yet. And somebody needs to make a quick change of typo fix, so grammatical error fix, whatever, to the page that's live now. You have to have, your old version, which is the one being viewed, the new version, the one you're working on. Now you got to edit this one. So if you're to create a new revision, that's fine. You get a 3rd one. And now this is the one that is live now, and your draft is older. And that's fine, as long as we can indicate to people that that's what happened, is that your draft is a previous revision to the one that's, because that one got copied into a new one. Or if you started with the ability to just edit your old one, you could just edit it, fix the typo, and save it, and you still have only the new version that's under review and the old version that's live. And I think that because the system already supports both ways to do that, we just need to be really careful about being clear about what's happening in any given interface. So if we're on an interface that has the checkbox, it needs to either allow you to create a new version or not, or we remove the checkbox and somehow indicate that like this is always going to be a new revision.
Okay.
And one of the things I thought might help with that is if you're on the revisions interface right now, the button says edit. But if you're going to be creating a new revision, just changing the language in that button might be enough. Like make a copy or something like that.
I was about to say that each time that a person creates a revision, when someone else edits that revision, we don't use the word edit that revision. We clone that revision and make a copy that where the author of that revision that is about to be edited is the person currently editing it. So the other people cannot edit other people's revisions. As in, they can click a button that says edit. It shouldn't say edit. It should say something else to represent what it does. But what clicking that button does is it creates a copy of that revision, changes the author, and then they can save it as their revision. When they're doing that, the checkbox that says create a new revision means that another revision with that author will be created.
So 2.
Yeah, second one. So I mean, if you go back and re-edit your own revision, the checkbox means that there will be another one created with you as the author. If you don't check that, you will be editing your own old revision. but others cannot, like other people cannot edit revisions by other people. They can
I-
remove them if they become obsolete, but they cannot directly edit them. They can create copies of them that belong to them.
Is that like a permission setting, or is it just like that? Like, I feel like I've had a lot of experience where like you have a news post that's written by some particular person and then it gets edited by an editor and the author doesn't change. But I don't know how that happened. Like technically how it was configured on the site.
I might be tempted to try to simplify this and just say, if you edit a past revision, it always has to create a new one. There's no option to edit the past one. Like if it's not, if it's not the active revision, then any editing creates another revision.
What do you mean by active?
The active being the one that's currently visible on the site.
Okay.
So the active revision you can edit and uncheck the box and say, I don't want to create a new revision for
So
it.
are we removing the core feature, the checkbox in the message area?
No, the checkbox would still be there for the active revision. The one that's currently visible. So you could choose not to create another revision of the one that's already there if
Okay.
you wanted to. But
Yes.
for all other revisions, if you
one.
edit it, it's going to make another one.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I'm
we
fine
can
with
do
that as long as we remove that user interface element from everywhere and change the word edit. I think that's fine.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So not from everywhere.
Well, from every
Yeah,
page
that-
except for the active, and I don't
Active.
know what word we're going to use for active. I think visible is fine. I don't know if anyone has any objections to that.
Default, because I was thinking of current, but
Mhm.
current
Current
gets a
also
ties.
indicates time though,
Yeah.
Yes, it implies time. So
and
default,
you have a newer one.
yeah, the default revision then.
Well, default is also
So-
that sounds like the first one. Do you have
No.
idea, Joseph?
So
Yeah.
what if you just labeled in the user interface the future revisions as drafts?
We could
So
do that,
it's-
but then what do we call the one that's not in the future?
Unpublished. Yeah.
It's the current revision.
Current.
Current.
You have
Yes.
a current revision, you
I
have
don't
draft,
like this.
you have a current revision, which is the one that people can view. You have draft revisions, which are in the future, and then you have old revisions, which are in the past.
Or Gregory, you had a good name for these two, like backup or something.
Well,
I don't remember.
yeah,
You said something a while ago. I was like, that's a good word, but I don't remember what it is.
we have
Okay.
recorded, so we can figure out what I said.
Okay, I'm
current,
okay with current as long as other people are okay with that. Having like, it does feel like current equals newest, and that's not the case. I'm okay with it, but
yes.
So
Okay.
I find ways that any of these terms can be confused. So I
Yes.
don't disagree
Yes.
with you, but don't have a better option.
okay.
And like Joseph's proposal, right? Of
Okay.
Yeah.
draft to help clarify that.
Yes,
Okay.
and we need to. Another thing that we need to sort of like separate is when you say draft to people, they always think unpublished. So we need to separate those.
Well, I don't know about that because I
Drafts
think
are always
when they think-
unpublished.
Well,
but
when
unpublished-
they think unpublished, they think not visible, right? They're not actually thinking published, not published, thinking not visible. And in this case, these drafts are not visible. They just happen to be
Yeah.
not visible copies of a visible piece of content that is published. Because your drafts themselves, my words are hard. The
We're
drafts
basically,
themselves aren't visible, but the note, so I think the published status only needs to apply to the note. Like you can't have published on revisions. Like the note is published or it's not published. And the revisions are visible or they're not visible.
Yep.
But we can't have an unpublished revision on a published node. That's just not.
well, no, I think you can. What Joseph is saying, the future revision or the draft revision.
But my
is
point
exactly
is not that it doesn't exist. My point is that you can't call it published. You have to call it
the,
draft.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah,
the draft revision.
Yeah.
and we wouldn't say like, well, we wouldn't say that the revision is published, or we could if we wanted to.
No, no.
But we would
that's
say
not-
the node as a whole is published.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The published is a state of the node itself.
It has nothing to do with revisions.
Yes.
Only the node.
So speaking of nothing to do with revisions, like we still have a whole raft of problems on the node edit form regarding like how do you create a draft revision? And how is that different from what happens if you create a draft revision that has a different node published state? You know,
can't.
it's just like,
The node is either published or not. The drafts have no published state. They only have, what do we call it? A current state.
well, I guess maybe let's go back to the first question of how do you make a revision that is not a draft? How do you make a draft revision?
Okay, so are you on a published node?
Yeah.
And you want to make a draft revision?
Mhm.
So then you tick
So
the
you
checkbox
go
that
to-
says create. You tick the checkbox that says create a revision. Then we change the submit button to save new draft.
Yes.
So checking the box doesn't actually update what's shown.
So
Well, you can do this already, right? I think, but you have to go to the revisions tab. And there's a
Right.
create new revision button.
Yes.
Yeah,
That, you
and
can just leave it like that.
but when you create a new revision, that loads the node edit form, doesn't it?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I think they all revision edits are the node edit form.
So I'm
Just
thinking.
default are different.
The PR does do this already, right? It allows you to create a new draft revision.
So
Published
one version of it did, and it added another checkbox that said, make this revision the active revision or something like that. But I was opposed to it because I found that to be confusing just
Yeah.
conceptually.
I
So
like Gregory's idea.
Yeah, so my ideal workflow would be you have an existing piece of content, right? And you click the edit button. You're in the page, and then you need to decide if you're going to save on top of what you're editing, which doesn't create a revision. You're overriding what exists there, or you tick the checkbox that says create a new revision. And then when you save, what you do is you're saving a new revision.
sorry, where's the checkbox? I wasn't paying attention there.
We already have the checkbox. Maybe we need to rename it. There's a checkbox that says create revision.
Right.
So when that checkbox is ticked, the button should not say save. It should say create new draft,
So
because that's what you're going to be doing. If
So
you
is
don't
there-
check that,
would there be any way to create a new revision and publish it at the same time?
it would need to be a separate submit button. I guess it would be two options.
Oh, like there would be a new button. For
I
two
like the
buttons.
new button. Sorry.
Yes.
So on the issue, there's actually a picture of like one of the Drupal 8 style buttons with a drop down menu built into it.
Right.
You guys not
Well,
like this?
yeah, I think that was the initial issue, which is funny because Drupal found out that, surprise, nobody could figure that out. Like it was just confusing to have a
Yeah.
drop button. Like that's just not a paradigm that is
Yeah, I
conceptually
think
well
the button's
supported.
good.
I'm
And I
gonna,
like Gregory's idea about the label.
I'm gonna make a counter argument, which is once you started doing revisions, that button goes away. That like as soon as you get into having multiple revisions, every time you save, you're creating a new revision, and that you don't have that option. I don't know. I just don't see the value in that. Even if the active version, if you're editing that, just create a new revision.
So you're saying every time you create a new revision, it is not the active version. And you actually have to check a different box on a different page to make it active?
So
Yeah.
currently,
The
the
question
screenshot
is
that I'm
not about whether you're creating a copy or not. It's about whether the copy you're creating is active, is current or not.
Yeah, the screenshot that I'm looking at is from a comment that you posted, Tim, back in 27th of October. And it has a tick box that says make default. I would like that to be a button. That's
What?
what's done. So on that issue,
Yeah.
on the comment that you made on the 27th of October, there's a screenshot that has a tab that says revision information, and it says make default. This is an action. It should be
Sure.
a submit button.
Sure.
And it would make things so much easier. So the default would be to, I don't know, update the current revision, but you could have a secondary button, which would be,
Right. So if we still haven't settled on a term, whether it's current, default, whatever, the version that people see, right? I would say that you could, on any node, you could click a box that said that, and that became the one that's visible. But what I'm saying is you would never have the option to edit a revision and not create a new revision. You would never
Yes,
have
I
that
think-
possibility.
Right, yeah, we've all
Yes,
agreed on.
we agreed on that.
Well, that's not what I was hearing at all. I was hearing Gregory say that if we have 5 versions, and if version 3 is the one that's active, that the user could edit that active version and not create a new revision. That's what I thought he said. I could be wrong.
No.
Okay,
No.
then it's not a problem.
Yeah, no, we're trying to figure out how to handle the node form
Yes.
for
Right.
the
Yeah,
use.
but I thought Gregory was saying that node form should allow for something that he wasn't. So that was my confusion.
Okay. No, but I like your reference to that comment, Gregory, except for that I'd rather have it be the other way around, which I think this is what you were saying earlier too, where the main button would be set active, although we'd call it current or whatever, and then there would be a second button that would be like create a new draft. Or I mean, I don't
So
know.
this is-
Should it be main and second,
Okay,
but-
stop. Okay, let me jump in here because my point is that you never need to click a box to say create a draft because you're always creating a new revision.
No, so we're not
Yeah.
talking about revisions, Tim. We're talking about whether the thing you're saving is going to be active or draft.
Or not. Yes.
Yeah, so you always create a new revision, but is that active?
Yeah,
Yes.
That's the
exactly.
question.
So maybe we need different words on the button, right? Because all these words mean lots of different things depending on like
Okay.
what page you're on the site.
So this goes back to the thing that I mentioned earlier during the meeting when I said that we're thinking with a developer mentality of what happens in the background, and we sort of like put odd user interface. This is the same as in the custom blocks where we make a custom block reusable. We tick a box to make it reusable. It should be an action. It should actually be a button. And I mentioned that before, and I think we have an issue. Same applies here. You are ticking a box for something that would be better perceived by the inexperienced user if it was an actual button.
Right.
Well,
But what do we
hang
put
on.
in the
Something
box?
just occurred to me is that why is it a checkbox? Why isn't it radio buttons that say create draft revision, create active revision? You
No,
know,
it shouldn't.
like-
It shouldn't be radios either. It should be buttons.
Buttons, yes.
Submit
Two different
buttons.
options. Two submit buttons. See
Yeah.
how you have when you create a view, you have one that says save and one that says save and edit. The same with content types. You have one that says save and one save and manage fields. So this is what we're doing: either save or save and make active. Clear.
Mm.
People don't
Interesting.
have to dig.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, people don't have to dig into the vertical tab things because they're secondary elements, unimportant. Every option that they have when they save is there.
Okay,
Well,
so
how-
save and make current or something. And then here's another wrench just to throw into things that we didn't test until we got the last PR up is that we currently have this scheduling ability. So
Right.
This is revision scheduling. We can agree all that what we have in core now is scheduling the active or current revision to be published or unpublished. We don't have a feature of publishing or publishing future revisions or past revisions.
okay,
Maybe
wait,
that could be a separate thing.
okay, so you said things that confuse me, so I'm gonna say them back and you can tell me if I'm saying what you said. Okay, so what we have in core right now is the ability to schedule whether a node is published or not. We do not currently have the ability to schedule whether a revision is current or not. So should we remove the scheduling UI from the node edit form if
If it's a revision.
every revision is a revision? If the
I have-
revision,
I have to think about it.
okay, but we know we're not going to put it there. We just need to figure out what the conditions are under which
Yes.
that's not allowed. Okay, so
So-
that does leave room for a contrib module to add that back in because we have
Yes.
the ability and we're just trying to figure out the user interface. And it leaves room for contrib modules to handle like workflow stakes and all the crazy stuff that Taquan wanted it to. And hopefully we haven't broken any of the features that we had before. Like the first version of the PR, we're like, I don't know how any of it fits together. Okay, so we're gonna add 2 buttons to the edit form, remove the checkbox for creating a draft when it doesn't make sense, or whatever the checkbox is for, and then change the word edit. And then
Wow.
something solved.
I think we need to discuss further. I don't like
Yes.
more
Right,
buttons.
I just wanted to figure out what to put in the issue, like what we talked
Yeah.
about.
Yeah, I mean, or like, I think, yes, dumping all of that as it sounds useful
Okay,
as feedback. And
Right,
we might
I
take
need-
a large swath of this to contrib.
I need to,
Yes. And Tim,
but
does
I'm
that
very happy with this conversation. Thank you for
Yes.
helping me with words.
Yes. So, Tim, does that make sense now when you mentioned that Doc Wilmot was seeking for input, and why I was saying, yes, I need to get to it. It's a lot of work and I need to consider a lot of things. It's not as easy as, yes, I reviewed it. So there's a lot of complex things that make.
I think I was saying exactly the same thing. I was saying it was impossible for anybody to sort of give feedback until we talked about it because it was so complex.
Yep. Fair enough. Maybe this needs to be a separate meeting for that issue altogether, which comes back to the initiatives that we were talking about and how the people that are working on the initiative should have meetings, which I don't object.
Real quick before I go, does anyone else have the ability to end the recording?
No,
Yeah,
I think
could
we just need to
we
end
could
it.
end it.
Okay, I'm like, before I leave.
Okay,
I'm
well,
ready
thanks,
to.
everybody.